This episode of The Four Top is coming to you courtesy of Live. That's Live, an insider tip that stands for Low Input Viticulture and Enology. Live is the leading third-party certifier of sustainable wine growing in the U.S. Pacific Northwest. You can see Live certification on wines from Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. I have personally worked with Live and its members for years, and I just have to say I'm so proud to have them as a supporter. So stay tuned, folks, for our sponsor break later in the show. You can hear more about Live and its members' commitment to climate action, worker rights, natural resource conservation, and so much more. Thank you so much, Live. And now it's time for the Four Top.
As I was driving here, Catherine, I was thinking about symbolism. I really love the symbol of the rainbow. The rainbows are great. Sometimes rainbows can misbehave. You know where misbehaving rainbows go?
Where?
They go to prism. And while they're in prism, they're missed. Hello, everyone. We are going to do something unusual this morning and record some audio together. My name is Martin Reyes, Master of Wine, and third season co-host of a wine podcast called The Four Top. And this season, The Four Top will focus on the 6 pillars of sustainable wine growing leadership. If you've been following along, you would know exactly where we're going. And this has formed the architecture of a symposium held for the second year in Napa. So we thought it'd be fun to record an episode with a live studio audience. And this is my co-host, wine author, Catherine Cole, and she will get this started.
Hello, good morning, everyone, and so nice to see you all here, and also to our listeners. Welcome to the Four Top. It's a roundtable discussion of the hot button topics in the wine world. I'm your host, Catherine Cole. This is Martin Reyes. You just met him.
And we are live at Charles Krug Winery at Napa RISE. So now, as we are here at the symposium, we all know RISE is organized around those 6 pillars of sustainability. Today's program will focus on social justice, diversity, and inclusion.
That's right. And this can be an uncomfortable topic. And I actually love this topic. I love anytime we talk about issues about diversity and inclusion on the Four Top, because that's when I get angry emails and messages from listeners, because people get mad when we talk about these things because they make them uncomfortable. And every time we talk about something uncomfortable that makes people mad, I think we need to come back and revisit this and talk about this again. So I am just really excited to dig into this today.
Yeah, you mentioned something earlier, Catherine, that sometimes that's where the best conversations happen, is when you get that zone of discomfort. And I think it's also it's where we're most authentic.
Yeah.
And there's power in authenticity, but if you dig a little deeper, there's power and overlooked power in humility, not knowing the answers, but being committed to asking the questions. In particular, this topic, DEI, stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's had a learning curve for everyone, from the novice discovering things like microaggression, the evolving meaning of the phrase "doing the work," or why DEI has evolved to include the letter B and what that stands for.
What does the letter B stand for?
Belonging.
Excellent. We can't wait to hear more from Dr. Cadet. But the wine industry, we were described as having that shift, that seismic shift in 2020, like many other industries and cultures. But the seeds of that were planted a long time ago. Wine culture is our expression. It's a mirror that expresses the stark truths of humanity, some of our most beautiful intentions and our worst tendencies. Those have played out in recent years, and we're here today to cover that stuff, and this is why this topic is one of the 6 pillars of sustainable wine growing leadership.
Well, you know what I'd like to do?
Let's do it.
I'd like to introduce our guests, our panelists, and really dig into this subject. And I will start with Dr. Kadei. We just heard from Dr. Akila Kadei is a speaker, creative director, producer, writer, editor, author. I probably left some things off of that. She's the founder and CEO of Change Kadei, a diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting firm offering workshops, executive and organizational coaching, and more. And along with Mariam Ahmed, whom people here will be hearing later today. She is a partner in the Diversity in Wine Leadership Forum, which was co-founded by Elaine Chacon-Brown, who's sitting right there, friend of the podcast. She has been named a Forbes Next 1000 Entrepreneur and Staffing Industry Analysts, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Influencer, and many other things. Thank you for being here, Dr. Akila Kadei.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be part of this conversation.
Welcome. And we have Philana Bouvier, who is the president of Domain Estates, a family-owned producer, importer, and marketer of fine wines, and an outspoken advocate for diversity and equity in the wine and spirits industry. She is co-founder of Diversity and Inclusion Initiative, Be the Change, and a board member of Lift Collective, and was named a 750 Daily Drink Innovator of the Year for her work in opening opportunities for women in wholesale C-suite positions. Boy, she also has served as both chair and vice chair of the Women's Leadership Council for Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America. Philana, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm so excited. I have to say really quickly, I was getting ready this morning, and when you are invited to do these really intentional panels, you always end up working with people or meeting people that you were meant to work or meet. And so it is just such an honor because I look across the room and I see two women that I admire so much already. I'm sitting next to someone that is so courageous and doing so many incredible things. And I meet you, Catherine, and of course, Martine, and I just want to say thank you for the space.
We're delighted to have you here. Well, let's get started with our first question, our first thought-provoking question. We want to talk about the point where the talk stops and the walk needs to start. Stop talking, start walking, folks. What happens if businesses don't get anywhere, though? So let's start out. Actually, Dr. Kadei, maybe you can just tell us a little bit about what you do with Change Kadei, which is your business. Tell us a little bit about the DEI consultation services you offer, and maybe what you might offer to, say, a wine business.
Yeah, so the work that we do is centered around belonging. My doctorate is in leadership and organizational behavior, so that's just a fancy way to say I'm a nerd of all things biz-wise. We work with anyone from startup companies to billion-dollar companies. We are part of something that you, I'm pretty sure, use every day. We have a lot of influence. Sometimes it's front-facing, sometimes we're in the background. We work in multiple different areas, from putting together a strategy, problem-solving, assessing, surveys, focus groups to figure out what is needed in that particular workforce. We will take policies to the next level. We'll change job descriptions to be inclusive. We'll look at that full spectrum of the employee life cycle. Of course, we have workshops. I don't believe in trainings. I think trainings are a waste of time, and I say that with confidence. Trainings are typically designed for, hey, do this thing external to the organization, and then go back into the organization that's not necessarily there with their mission, their vision, their values, policies, practices, and procedures. So we do workshops, which means the doing the work term. An individual has to do the work with their thoughts, beliefs, behaviors, actions, and how they show up, absent of any process or place in which an organization may be. We also provide executive coaching. So we work specifically with leaders because leaders have the most influence, regardless of how they identify, regardless of their intersectionality. These are the individuals who can role model the behavior. And what Martine said earlier, making sure that they're comfortable being the individual who doesn't know everything, because we all don't know what we don't know, and helping them realize that that is okay. Now, it's important to note that I am not just a diversity consulting firm. I am an organizational development consulting firm, and I center belonging, because regardless of how someone identifies, if they do not feel like they can belong in that space, then we're not getting the best out of them. We're not giving them the best. So that belonging, that B, which we'll talk about more, is really important. So that's what we do. We also talk a lot. We do lots of things. But specifically for wine industries, companies, we work with them. We have been working with them. I've been working in the wine industry for a few years now. But we are intentional about providing a community through our Diversity Wine Leadership Forum. And our Diversity Wine Leadership Forum is a place where people can come together to work collectively on how to provide more opportunities for women, LGBTQ+, BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color, as well as the disabled community. And so with this forum, we're providing an opportunity for them to have access to more things and resources so that they can continually do the work. We also do it to uplift individuals and organizations who are already doing the work and making sure that we're linking them to different points in the wine industry. The last thing I'll say is that the wine industry likes to think that they are special and different. But y'all aren't. You have the same problems as Google, the same problems as anything else in hospitality, the same problems that you have in retail. And so it's just realizing that something that may not feel like it's something that you understand, an example, an experience, or resource, is something that is applicable to your space. Because when you work in diversity, equity, inclusion, but belonging and creating cultures of belonging, it's realizing that all of us as individuals have a transferable skill set to keep continuously doing the work that is needed. So we all feel like we belong.
Dr. Goudet, thanks for reminding us that we are not all that special in the wine industry.
You're welcome.
But what is interesting to note is, or to really consider, sustainable agriculture is obviously linked to the wine industry, but how is there a natural fit between the work that we're discussing today and wine, DEI and wine?
We don't want the world to end. So we need parts of sustainability. And when we think about sustainability, we have to have more investments in different ways of doing things. And thinking about, well, this process may be more expensive, but over time, it saves the world. It gives us more longevity to have these beautiful things that we get to experience and smell and taste from wine and what we pair it with. The other side is when you think about sustainability, that includes people who are doing the work. So who's doing the work? People who most likely can't afford to live where you are, right? So sustainability has a social justice component where you have to think about who's doing the work. Do they have a livable wage? Are they able to have access for benefits, not just for themselves, their family? Are you providing trajectories for those individuals who are doing the work that are around sustainability to have an opportunity to thrive and, I don't know, maybe live in Napa, right? We're in this area because we know there's lots of people who commute. So what's being done to build community around sustainability that is connected back to belonging? And then it's an investment. So just like a lot of wine companies are saying, particularly after the murder of George Floyd, I'm going to invest in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and some people may still be doing that or not. It's the same thing. You're making that investment to doing something differently. You're making an investment to changing something that over time will have systemic impact around the people and the actual environment for moving towards those sustainability goals, B Corp or not.
It's really, you have to lead by example and be involved in the community that you're working with and be an advocate for change in your company. So much of my own personal experience in getting involved in initiatives was because of a reaction that I had of not feeling belonging. I mean, I wish I would have met you and had your business in the wholesale business when I started 20 years ago, because that was a business that was predominantly very, very white Caucasian male. And you really felt it in the room when you walked in. And so a lot of what you're saying is if you don't feel like you belong and you're the only one in an organization that's trying to drive towards change, and you have an organization that are saying that they're checking the block and they're doing all the things with sustainability, but their behaviors don't reflect that, you know intuitively that you're not in the right place.
Philana, I want to dig into that a little because I feel like we wanted to talk about going from talking the talk to actually walking the walk in this part of the conversation. And I think there is a tendency for companies to bring in someone like Dr. Goudet, say, okay, fix us. Okay, person of color, tell us what we're supposed to do. Okay, thanks, we feel better. And then everyone goes back to the way they were before. So, to your point earlier, Dr. Goudet, about everyone doing the work, how do
how do we get everyone involved and really participating in this, and not just the token person in the company who's supposed to speak for this?
Absolutely. And this to me is a very personal subject, because when you are working, I was in distribution for the most of my career. And when you are the only Asian female doing that, then you have an organization, and I will always be respectful of how you rise up in your career. But I think what's most important is to create a position or bring in a person of color, and to make them feel that they are the only person responsible for change is extremely unfair. Because you're not setting up your own organization for success, you're not setting up the person for success, and it becomes this weight on your shoulder that you're supposed to fix. And if you don't have the support of your CEO and of the board, and it's starting at the top, you will not be successful. And it becomes performative. It becomes just, okay, I'm doing it just to do it. And it's false. It's not holistic. It's not genuine. And those are reasons why people leave companies, because the culture is false. It's not a true culture. It's not a genuine culture. I don't believe that any organization that hires one consultant and says, okay, I need you to do all this work, and you know what, you're going to present to my board meeting, once a quarter, and just give me some KPIs and I'll get it done. That's not it. It is a journey. It is hard. You're going to have to go through the work. You can't just take a training class and just think, okay, I'm going to get, it doesn't work like that. And you have to bring in really professional HR individuals that have experience in DEI, and it's a team. It's not just one person.
Yes, absolutely. All of those things. The COO is not hired to work individually. The COO has to work with the CMO, has to work with the CEO. But when it comes to a chief diversity officer or belonging or whatever acronym soup is used for that person, that expectation is on them. So unfortunately, it creates a very healthy sarcasm, unhealthy cycle in which these individuals are told all of the things. You're going to be resourced. We believe in you. We are dedicated. And as soon as they get into the work, they find out they aren't going to be they aren't going to have the resources they need. The CEO just did something performatively because of the demand of the client or the consumer or whatever it may be, and then they leave. And when they leave, they go through the same cycle over and over and over again. And then these individuals get burnt out. They're like, you know what, I'm just going to buy a winery and do something else. They'll go to a completely different industry because it's not supported. Furthermore, you have to look at the pipeline. There is no diversity degree. There are certification programs that are out there, but it's really dependent on that person's intersectionality, their lived experience, and their time to get to that place. And so there's variance to what is expected. But also, if you are a BIPOC person, LGBTQ+, disabled, a woman, or multiple points, and are in a leadership position, you do fall into what you're saying, Catherine, which is being tokenized. And when you're tokenized, that goes further and further into being performative and being the only person who's leading change. So the only way it works is that if it's collective leadership. So the CEO's actions and words have to match. Intent versus impact have to match. It's none of this dumbass shit where it's like, well, that wasn't my intention. Well, actually, guess what? I don't care if it was your intention or not. The outcome, the impact is harm. So you have to hold yourself accountable to the harm that was caused and go into a recovery mode and role model that for your other leaders. Role model that for anyone else in the organization so they realize that, again, they're all not going to know what they don't know. But that's the harder part. Because when you are a CEO or when you lead a company, you are destined, you are told, your ego is filled that you know all the things. I know all the things, I know how to solve all the things. And so if you don't know how to do something, and what I call, they aren't ready to be comfortable being uncomfortable, they will cower, they will move away from something, and then all that investment doesn't make any sense, and then they'll say, oh, it didn't work. We hired a Black person, it didn't work. We worked with tequila, it didn't work. It's like, I got uncomfortable.
So I'm thinking, as somebody who's listening who either knows a C-level person, is a white male, straight, cis business leader. It's good to hear that. And you may hear it over and over again. how do we make it so that there is this, going back to the early part, how do we make it so that they feel comfortable being vulnerable, being given permission to make mistakes while they learn? Because otherwise they will resist, they'll divert their attention potentially elsewhere. I worry about that sometimes with organizations that I work with, and I would love to hear both of your thoughts.
This is not a big question for me. This is something I get all the time. I just do not care about other people's feelings, because my feelings are disregarded all the time. All the time. And so if a heterosexual cisgender white male is it's all in his feels, that is how I feel all the time. I'm in a room where last time I checked, I'm the only Black person in this room. Oh, one more. Whew. Yes, thank you. There's two of us in a room full of people. We're together. I don't belong in this room right now. I don't belong in the wine industry. I do not belong. And so when someone's saying, well, this is making me uncomfortable, that is an opportunity to realize what it's like for the one white woman in your room. But because of ego, because of privilege, because of power dynamics, they don't want to release that. And when they don't want to release that, that's where resistance happens. That's where resources are lost. That's where, you won't see people who are committed and actually dedicated to move past allyship and be someone who is more of an advocate or an accomplice, who realizes that my goal in life is to brush my teeth, put on my deodorant, check my bias, check my privilege every day. To realize that I'm in a position of power, and it doesn't make me a bad person as a white person to be in a position of power, either just by ethnicity or title or both. It's not a bad thing. And realizing it's more of an opportunity. I have more power, so I can do more things. Everyone thinks I'm really cool, but I'm still going to be biased and discriminated against as soon as I walk out of this room, even as Dr. Akila Kade on a Forbes list. I will still get that no matter what I do, because I don't have the privilege of being a heterosexual cisgender white male as the person who has the most power. When we think about dominant culture, white supremacist culture, they have the most power. They need to realize it's an opportunity to use their power for good. The way in which it goes into a position of harm is when they stop and say, this is uncomfortable for me, I don't want to do it. And because of their power dynamic, it stops every single other thing. Or it goes back on the one woman, however she identifies, to fix. Or it goes back on that BIPOC person, however they identify, to fix. They have to realize that they have the privilege to not live in a position when their life is at risk every single day. And so they can use that in a way to make the world a better place. So I don't have to do this shit. I don't want to do this, but apparently y'all want to listen to me do this type of work, right? Which is fine. I'm great at it, whatever, I'll lean into it. But I'm doing it amongst the lovers of intersectionality that limits my opportunity. I just got my first death threat 3 weeks ago for doing this type of work. Is it stopping me from doing the work? No, I'm sitting here on an important podcast to talk about it. So no, I do not care about white men's feelings about doing the work to make the world a better place.
Last night, Martin and I were talking about this, Dr. Kade, and thank you for saying that. And I said, I don't really understand why I was invited to moderate this panel. I'm just a white girl. I'm a white lady. And I was like, well, Martin, tomorrow, I'm just going to get on stage and shut the fuck up and let everyone else talk. And then I was like, wait a minute, no. What I should do is speak the fuck up, because I am the one white person on this stage, so I should be talking too. I shouldn't just be asking everyone else to be doing all the work. So, yeah, thank you.
And it's important to recognize it's hard. It's emotional, it's hard. I always go back to just my own personal experiences and just hearing you, Dr. Kade. What you're saying is extremely true. And we grew up in a world where there's another generation, another group of people that have more privilege, and they have an opportunity to do good, but yet they rely on other people of color to do it for them, and that is unfair.
Catherine, can you dig in a little bit more of what you said? Because I think that part of what you told me last night was omitted in terms of speaking up, but speaking up in how and why.
Well, I do think, Dr. Kade, you were talking about this area of discomfort. And I think the thing is, learning is something as human beings that we enjoy, learning and growing. And I think, there, like I said at the beginning, there is this defensiveness where people say, how dare you accuse the wine industry of being racist? And they get defensive and they get angry and but if you can just lean into it, you realize if you work on yourself in other ways, it feels good. You do yoga, it feels good. Okay, I'm gonna work on my social skills. That feels good too. And getting back to something you mentioned earlier, Martin, about why the wine industry? Why should the wine industry be a leader in this space? Well, what do? We sit around and we taste wine and we talk about faults and flaws, right? We talk about it all the time. Well, what about talking about the faults and flaws with the way we treat other human beings? That's another thing we're good at talking about faults and flaws, right? We're good at talking about diversity. We don't like monocultures. The 6 pillars of sustainability, it's all about creating a polyculture in your vineyard. How about creating a polyculture in your workplace? These are concepts we understand. I used to be a wine journalist. Every time I pitched an editor something that was different, an indigenous grape variety, that was when they got excited. Well, let's talk about indigenous people then. These are concepts and words we use all the time.
This episode is supported by LIVE, that's LIVE, standing for Low Input Viticulture and Enology. And I am delighted to be joined here by LIVE's Executive Director, Chris Serra. Hey, Chris.
Hi, Catherine. How are you?
I am so great now that we get to talk about LIVE, one of my favorite subjects. In our last conversation, in the last episode, you and I spoke about LIVE's commitment to biodiversity, pesticide reduction, and natural resource conservation. So I thought for this episode, let's focus on social sustainability. So tell us what that includes. It's worker rights. What else? What else is social sustainability?
Sure. LIVE has certification standards requiring worker health and safety measures for both the vineyard and winery certifications that we offer. We also require our members to examine their community impact. One of the projects that we're currently working on is with Linfield University here in Oregon to set forth comprehensive social sustainability criteria. These criteria include 15 areas of focus, such as employee remuneration, diversity, equity, and inclusion, human rights, and customer health and safety.
That is fantastic. And I love that you're working with Linfield University on that. They have such a great wine education program. Very cool to hear about. And I know, Chris, LIVE is a tiny but mighty organization. I seem to remember that in your office, you only have 2 people and then you have 4 inspectors doing certifications for you, but you still manage to hold yourself to the same standards that you require of your members, correct?
Yeah, in addition to standard setting, which is our main business, we take an active approach to this work. We set up and fundraised for a scholarship for students in Chemeketa Community College's Wine Studies program in Salem, Oregon.
Nice. I like that you not only talk the talk and hold others to high standards, but you also walk the walk and hold yourself to high standards. Social sustainability, it's really just about human beings supporting other human beings, right? I mean, how hard can that be?
Yeah, reducing harm and exploitation as much as possible is really what it's all about. We have 325 vineyards and 38 wineries working toward this goal under our standard. And our social network is strong. LIVE is not only the leading certifier of sustainable wine growing in the Pacific Northwest, but it has also inspired a growing movement of similar grassroots certification programs worldwide.
Wow, that is very impressive. I am so inspired, Chris, and I am really looking forward to our next conversation. Thank you.
Me too. Thanks.
So the part 2 of our discussion today is wish washing. And really, we know we're at a sustainability conference where everyone in the audience knows the term greenwashing. And we love to dig into the concept of lip service and other forms of washing. We've heard terms like rainbow washing, pink washing, color washing, et cetera, et cetera. And so, Philana, as a woman of color who is the president of a luxury wine company and is a leader in social responsibility in the wine industry, I'd love to hear your thoughts on these terms. Are they useful? Are they annoying? Or do you have a favorite?
I definitely don't have a favorite. I'm very fortunate. We're a company with a Black CEO and an Asian female president. And we're very proud of that. I have an extraordinary boss and founder who I work with that is not only leading by example, but is extremely compassionate. And, you know, in our organization, diversity starts within your DNA. We're not an organization that's going to create and I don't know if this answers your question on washing, but for us, since I've been in this organization and running Domain Estates, it's important that for us, it's about how you make people feel. People want to feel good when they come to work. They don't want to have to be concerned about, and I think I went through this as I was coming up, just the sensitivity of when people are very inconsiderate because of the color of your skin. And my eyes have been open working with Carlton McCoy, who is one of the most phenomenal people I've ever worked for, and also extremely hardworking. And what he's done with the Roots Fund, how he is giving back to the community and what he is doing, and also ensuring a path for people of color to get into this business and get jobs. Those are the things that is important to us. So we don't really pay attention to those terms. I like to, and it's important for me and my own progress, is I can't listen to that noise, because my entire life I have been 100% judged because of, there's people that meet me, they don't even know what I do for a living, and that's okay, I don't need them to know, but they immediately think I'm, someone that's not in the position that I'm in today. And they immediately judge the color, the color or the cover of the book. And the wine industry has a long way to go, but so does the rest of the industry. And so does the rest of a lot of the companies that I know that you work with. We still have a long way to go. Having platforms like this is extremely important. Having discussions like this is important. I always believe in a call to action, and it's important that you get the right key players in the room to really make the action that's important. So I don't know if that answers your question, but for me, we really pay attention to just how people feel and ensuring that people feel good about where they work.
For those of you who can't see us, we're really beautiful. So that when you're in a position of leadership, it's apparently not supposed to go hand in hand, and that's a whole other podcast. Yeah, it's a lunch we're going to have about that. But what I'll say, I know. What I will say about washing is all the washing is performative. It's just done to get the points. Pink washing really gets on my nerves, because the NFL doesn't need to do it. You don't need to have all of these pink things, and the majority of the money from these pink things don't even go to cancer research. But people don't realize that. Unless they're explicit about it, it's just a way for people to make more money. Rainbow washing, green washing, make more money. But my absolute favorite washing is whitewashing.
What's whitewashing?
Whitewashing is the world. So I'll keep it simple. Whitewashing is news that you receive. The news you receive has a whitewashing angle to it. So, it's been a really hard, years that we have had. But even in this past couple of weeks, if you look at the two shootings that were next to each other, the representation of the white male shooter was much more positive. The pictures are much more positive. But for the trans person, also white, passing, very vicious, very hurtful and harmful. That's where my death threat came from, advocating for trans people. That's where my death threat came from. I was like, not because I'm Black? Wow, okay. But that's how much hate comes through the news. That's how whitewashing happens through the news. There's going to be favoritism towards white people. When it comes to Indigenous women, when it comes to Black women, when they're missing, when they're murdered, no one cares. No one cares. But if you are a white woman, you will be found. Dead or alive, you will be found. It'll be a story. You'll have all the resources. So whitewashing happens in the news. Look at the Ukraine war. Do you know how many wars are happening right now in BIPOC countries? A shit ton. But it doesn't get the same amount of press as Ukraine. And that's because when we look at dominant culture, meaning who's around, People relate more to what they know and the dominant culture. So white people can relate to Ukraine because it's like, oh my God, they're white. They have kids and they're white and they can't do their white things in their white home. And so they relate, and money and resources and time and attention and advocacy goes there. But Somalia, they can't relate, right? And so whitewashing happens through the news. Whitewashing is another way of performative activism, allyship, or behavior. Performative meaning, I did the one thing. I posted the black box. I donated to, Ralph Yarl's, GoFundMe. And then being able to move upon life. So similar to the theme earlier, what a lot of people don't realize if they're in positions of power. And when I say power, meaning heterosexual cisgender white male has the most power. Second is heterosexual cisgender white woman. And then if you are, a white guy or a white woman and disabled, LGBTQ plus, or woman or intersexual, you're further on the pole. I'm a black disabled woman. Do you know where I am? At the fucking bottom. I'm at the bottom. And so when we look at performative behavior, it's just saying, I did the one thing and I can go about my life. I can't, because I see things happen all the time that happen to me, that happen to people around me, that happen to communities of color, that happen to disabled communities that I can relate with, that I can't just do the one thing. I have to constantly be in this position of advocacy. And so when we see these washing campaigns, it's just the doing the one thing, which goes back into I have the privilege and the power, regardless of how that person identifies, to just do that one thing. But washing clothes is actually a great thing to do. That's the only washing that I like.
We heard recently there was a scholarship fund, I believe in the Napa Valley. The folks that organized it were having trouble getting applicants. And I'm wondering what your thoughts, Philana, what are your thoughts when you hear something like that? Well, we put aside this money, we thought we'd solve the problem, then no one showed up, no one applied. What's your reaction when you hear that?
I always say this, and I look at when there's organizations that call me. There's other people in the wine industry that will call me and be like, Philana, I'm doing the scholarship, but I didn't get any. I don't know what else to do. And I'm like, well, what did you do? Right? Did they just only appoint one person? Did you just only post it on LinkedIn? You have to do more than that. You have to get out into the community. You have to network outside of Napa, first of all. You have to work with historically Black colleges. You have to you have to partner with universities. You have to get out and understand, okay, what is the dynamic of what the scholarship means, and how do I get this information to the right person? And you have to go outside of the normal channels. So to me, I feel like it's almost, and I want to be careful when I say this, but it's almost lazy in a way when an organization puts something together and they just expect that everyone's just going to run to it. People of color are not, we're not charitable. I'm not a charity case. And I also don't want to be treated like a charity case either. It's about being able to do good with the money that you have, and it's not as simple as writing a check, and you have to be able to put programs together so it's meaningful and they feel good about it. That to me is a major reason why I see a lot of companies that put together scholarship funds that are not successful, because you have to have intent, and there has to be a 360 view. You have to take it all the way to the front, to the back. I don't know how to say that eloquently, but to me it's about execution. It's always about the results.
You're absolutely right, Philana. I will add to that. So, hey, here's this wonderful scholarship, fellowship, mentorship opportunity for you to be the only BIPOC person in a white-ass organization. That's not a selling point. As what I've been sharing to you before, we're dealing with microaggression after microaggression after microaggression. And so you're saying we're going to provide this opportunity for you, but you're going to potentially be our token person, one of three, the only one in the room. It's not the most welcoming environment. And so in those cases, I encourage those clients to look at their selves internally. What are you doing? What is being done to change things? Don't just give someone like opportunities or tickets to come to a tasting because you're like, hey, you're BIPOC, I'm gonna have you come. But then it's just a room full of white people who probably are racist. Not all of them, but some are. They're gonna be racist in the room. And it's not going to be, again, a welcoming environment. And so it's really looking at systemic issues. You want to know, what are those systemic issues that we can change? So one, okay, we have a scholarship, so we're going to be transparent about the fact that we are a predominantly white organization. Be transparent about it. So it's giving that person an opportunity to make the choice, but knowing there's some investment in learning and unlearning, making mistakes, accountability. Here's your point person to talk to. We are doing the work, and we know it's going to be uncomfortable. So there's that. The other thing is making sure that barriers are addressed against systemic issues. So, hey, we're going to give you this cool scholarship, but come to expensive-ass Sonoma, Napa. You won't be able to find a place to live, but it's fine. Trust me, you can live in Oakland and make it work. Trust me, you can live in Richmond and make it work. And so they have this horrible quality of life. Why would they want to do that, right? So what's happening so that, housing is part of an opportunity, or a stipend that allows them to have housing that it's at least in Napa, so they can still commute 35 minutes to come to St. Helena, or wherever they have to go. Like, what is being done there? And then along with addressing the pipeline, it's the realization that even our experience as BIPOC people going into wineries isn't welcoming. Do you know what people want me to drink? Does anyone want to guess what they want me to drink when I go to taste wine?
We can guess.
Oh, sweet, sugary, rosé, Moscato. That is me. They're making these assumptions, or they're not going to serve me, or I'm literally going to see that my experience is going to be completely different than the white couple next to me. Right? So there's other parts systemically that also have to be addressed so that you can have these scholarships and fellowships and opportunities. And it's the same for diversifying the workforce too. Hey, come work in this white ass company, and then, as soon as something happens in a BIPOC community or LGBTQ plus community, we're going to ask you to solve the problem, even though it's not your job, but we're going to ask you to solve that problem. And so it's that awareness that has to come into making those systemic changes so those types of things make sense.
The late, great Oregon winemaker Jesus Guillen used to talk about, he was this great winemaker, and people would come into the tasting room and assume he was the landscaper. He's famous. I mean, he was phenomenal, but yeah, it's just...
This is about access. It is so important to provide access to all people of identities. They have to have access. For my entire career, you're breaking down all these barriers, and then you're asked to talk about it, which is like, this to me is something that is an education point where organizations have to understand that it's already hard enough. We need access to everything. I want you to break out your Rolodex, and I want and I want you, my boss, or the organization I'm working with, to be proud to introduce myself and my colleagues to whomever you know, because whomever I know, you should know, and we have to break that down. It really is about access. When you don't have access to things, it makes things so much harder. And it's even with, I look at my own career, right? I don't have a college degree. I didn't come up to the wine industry traditionally. There's a traditional way to go up in wholesale. Everyone works at a wine industry. They go into the supplier role. They go into work into wholesale. I didn't do any of that. I started in the business at a very young age. 25 years old, I was a merchandiser. I worked my way up from the very bottom, did every single role in wholesale, and I still had to prove myself because there were barriers. And so if you are a person that is in a position where you can provide access, it is 100% you have to do it, because that is your responsibility in ensuring that there's diversity at the top.
I want to bring it back around to where we are today, who is in our audience and who is downstairs at the winery. Charles Krug here. We are probably at the epicenter of the tip of the spear of the most luxurious agricultural product in the world, and the most, it's Napa Valley, right? And we're not going to get it right, but what is happening is right now is that there is a building sense of community around organizations that are the Hugh Society, Wine Unify, Hispanics in Wine, Co-Fermented, B Labs is downstairs. And these organizations are themselves, each of them in their own way, building a community, either through funds for education, or just in general, a community of individuals that feel like they belong. And I recall I helped co-found Wine Unify, and my biggest fear and early on was, what if I mess up? What if I don't get it right? I'm not an expert on this subject just because I am a Hispanic male. I didn't go to any classes. I just wanted to do something, right? And I think a lot of us felt that way, still do. The question is, are we at a point where there's a 2.0 possibly about to occur? Is there an evolution in the fluency of understanding, of being able to listen to these powerful and beautiful women who are just laying down wisdom? And as we listen to this, whatever position, whatever role, however you present yourself, what is the next step, and are we approaching it?
I mean, yeah, we have to. I mean, people think things are rough right now, but they don't realize that next year is an election year. And so that's going to change a lot of things. And so typically when we have these election years, and since the Trump era, we are in a position where what happens in politics happens in the workplace. There's no separation of that. And that was brought together, sponsored by the pandemic. So since we were in a position where some of us had the privilege to work from home, or there's distancing, we had to slow down and see what's happening in the world. It was the kind of first time we've had in modern times where we've had collective understanding that change needed to happen, that advocacy needed to happen, that we needed to create cultures of belonging, all the way from work-life balance, but also to all the diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging things that we're seeing. We are in a position where if we don't act collectively, it's not going to be a good situation next year. I'm really not looking forward to, my book comes out next year, and I'm like, oh, well, it's probably gonna get banned, so I'm like, yay, I'll be a New York Times bestseller.
Can we pre-order it?
Not yet, because Akila is editing it right now and shooting a cover in 2 seconds. But when we'll share it with all of you, you'll have it. It'll be available. There's a list on my website if you want to go, if you want to get on the list, and we can send you the pre-sale link. But what's going to happen is there is going to be either collective chaos or collective uprising, and we all have to prepare for that because so many different points of intersectionality are being attacked right now. What's happening with trans youth, what's happening in our LGBTQ plus community, what's happening to women, what's happening to BIPOC women, what's happening to Black people, what's happening with gun control, what's happening with climate change, what's happening with an insane amount of atmospheric rivers. I think we have an atmospheric river season. I think California now has hurricane season, but atmospheric rivers, all of that is creating lots of change. And then we're gonna get into fire season because now we have fire season. All of this collectively has to, again, results in chaos or uprising. So I would ask all of you today in the room and listening to make a choice of what side you want to be on. Which way are you going to fuck shit up? Seriously, that's really what it has to be, and making that decision and then seeing in your body your purpose, your power, your privilege, your intersectionality of how you're committed to that. And you have to start to make that commitment now, because again, if you think this is bad, we have not even gotten to the part where it's just going to be horrific.
I think she said it perfectly. I mean, she's absolutely correct. It's an election year next year. There's going to be a lot of people doing things just for the sake of getting voted in. And there's a lot of sadness to that because they're doing it to just be elected. Are they doing it because it's the right thing to do? And those are the choices that we have to make. I mean, we can have a whole podcast about what's going on in Texas that makes me very, very upset, and what happened there with female rights and our rights to our body. I mean, that's a whole nother, that's a whole nother subject matter. And so you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, and I will say that I would encourage you all to take some time to look into white supremacy. just dabble into white supremacy. White supremacy is one of my favorite things to talk about.
We did an episode on is wine culture a white supremacist?
Listen to it. Listen to the episode.
A lot of people upset.
Yeah, let's get them upset again. Listen, white supremacy is actually not a bad thing when you look at it foundationally. What? Gas? What do you mean? White supremacy is awful. Sure, yeah. There's white supremacists, there's Proud Boys, there's racists, there's so much that goes into it. But what white supremacy is the very reason why the heterosexual cisgender white man doesn't want to work in sustainability, doesn't want to work in diversity, and that's the loss of power. People think white supremacy, when I say dismantling white supremacy, is the loss of power. But white supremacy isn't a bad thing. White supremacy is what everyone deserves. It's the social determinants of health. It's your hierarchy of needs. It's being able to drive down a street and get pulled over and get a ticket or not. It's being able to have a baby in this country and know it's going, the birthing person is going to survive and the baby is going to survive. It means going to the emergency room and being believed in pain. It means being served at a hotel. It means not being able to be a token. It means lots of things. Now, the problem is that's only designed for white people. So we don't get that benefit. BIPOC people don't get that benefit. It doesn't happen. So everyone else is literally fighting for their life one way or another. And white people are like, I'm good. That's fine. You know what? Actually, I can bankrupt an entire company and I will be just fine. Actually, I can tell an officer whatever I want to do and they're going to listen to me. You know, and it's really important to understand that power dynamic. So when we're saying dismantling white supremacy, it means everyone gets the same thing. Again, I'm disabled. I live with disability. And the simple fact that I have 3 degrees all centered in health, all health science, is nothing when I go into an emergency room. My body thinks it's having a heart attack every day. It's a casual flex. I could die at any moment in time. And it sucks, but I have to go to the emergency room all the time. I'm never believed. Even with a doctor's note, never believed. Even with me being Dr. Akila Kade, never believed. Even when, my alarm's going off right now to remind me to take my heart medication, because that's my life. I did. You're fine. Nothing's gonna happen. But even when I do everything white people tell me to do, to be a doctor, so you have to call me a doctor, so I have privilege. 3% of people have a doctorate in the country. It's 0.4 for Black women. That's a big clap for me. Thank you. That's a big deal. But even when I say that, people are like, okay, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do, right? So having all of the things I'm supposed to do, I have light skin privilege, I sound the way I sound, I've been wine tasting since I was 5, my father was a diplomat, my mom has always been a boss, I come from an educated family. My life is at risk every single day. Every single day. And so you have to really think as we move into this really combative time that's coming up. Because again, in Florida, you can't study my history. Think about that. You can't study my history. And so these little kids can't study my history. So they're gonna treat me like shit when they get into higher positions because they're not gonna have respect or value for me. Think about that. You cannot study my history. And so when we say we want to dismantle white supremacy, it means what can we do? What can we actively do with our privilege, with our power, what we have, so that everyone has an opportunity to live? I want to have a kid at some point. I'm probably going to, definitely have some type of traumatic event. And if I'm able to have that kid, for the entire life of that kid, I have to wonder if it's going to be a Ralph Yarl situation. That's not fair for me. For any white women or any birthing women in the room who are able to have kids, you can have a fucking kid and your kid's gonna be fine. That's not fair. And so you really have to look at these systemic issues. You really have to make a choice of how you wanna show up so things can be better. And if you think that it's there's nothing for me to do, you were part of the problem. Thanks for coming on the TED Talk.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. Kade. I really, really appreciate it. Alas, we're running short on time, but I wanted to leave a couple minutes to have our dessert course. Just a little something.
Yes, the dessert.
Little something sweet to send us off. We have so much to think about.
Can we just recognize what a badass Dr. Kade is?
I know.
What a badass. Please. I mean, let's just...
Thank you.
I think I'm going to ask Philana, did you bring a dessert course for us?
Yes, so what I've been doing lately, I have Very, very tough. You know, when you're building a startup company, it's long hours, very fun though, and very rewarding. But I have it's the thing I do every weekend. So every Saturday, I call it Self-Care Saturday. And the entire Saturday is dedicated to basically ensuring that I get lots of rest. I've been doing hot yoga, which I've been very excited about. It's finally back, and it's in San Francisco. So there's this really great place. It's a tiny little place. It's not a big, I like supporting small businesses. So it's a tiny little small business, and they do a hot yoga class on Saturdays and Sundays. And I go every Saturday and Sunday morning, and then I walk down the street and I get a smoothie at this tiny little place that I always love to go to. It's not Jamba Juice. And I have my own little process that I go through, and I just get my smoothie, and then that's kind of like that's my treat to myself, really.
So what I'd like to recommend is an excellent dessert course. It's a coveted beverage, and I know I'm not supposed to talk about a beverage for a dessert course.
You can if you want to, sure.
Okay, cool.
Talk about whatever you want.
So what you do, it's an experience. So you get this silver pouch, and you take this yellow straw, and you stick it in a hole of a Capri Sun. Pacific Cooler is one of my favorites. It's like my little happy little thing. It reminds me of not dismantling white supremacy. It reminds me of my childhood growing up in Sacramento. And I like to pair it with something trashy, like Love is Blind, which I know I'm behind, don't say anything, or Real Housewives of whatever season that brings you joy. And I just do that, and I just have a little moment of fun. And so I will say, there's a lot of joy in tapping into a childhood snack. I have trauma, so that's one reason why I do that too, but it kind of just takes you back to the moments where you didn't have to worry about shit. You don't have to pay taxes. You don't have to do anything. You're hoping in your lunch bag you had like something in there that was really cool. And so yeah, that's what I would recommend. Childhood snack. Love it.
Wow, childhood memories of snacks. Now you got me thinking of
Otter Pop. No.
I have a weird one, not my dessert course, but you made me think about, I would have white rice and butter.
That's delicious. I do that still, current situation.
Is anybody else?
Charter Oak makes a great.
Yeah, white rice and butter, and I was like 4 years old, and the other day I just like, you know what, I have this extra white rice. Where's my ghee? Now I'm saying ghee. What?
That's the adulting version.
Right. And so I just sat there and just ate white rice and butter. It's been 30 years since I've done that. So thank you for validating my childhood moment.
We need to move this conference to Hawaii, where I'm from. Would be good. This would be beautiful. Because Hawaii is... my favorite is actually, now that we're getting into it, is a Spam musubi.
Oh, yes.
My favorite thing to eat. I know I run a luxury company, but Spam is a cool thing to eat.
Spam is great.
It's one of the greatest things in the world. I miss it, but we have to get you all to Hawaii and do this. That would be cool.
You know, I actually just received an email that was talking about this great canned cured meat. And I opened the email. Turns out it was just Spam. It's a book that was recommended to me by Anna Britton, my co-founder and essentially the mastermind behind Napa RISE. And Inner Work is the book, and I've just started reading it. And it sounds a little hokey until you start reading it, and it's about uncovering the meaning of your dream images. I know it sounds like, yeah. But it takes you on the next level of dream work, and it's a 4-step journey to joining your conscious with your unconscious. It's pretty cool, and I'm getting into it. I've just read like 20 pages, and I'm like, this is my next dessert course. It's pretty awesome. I recommend it.
My dessert course, I want to kind of tie back to what you were talking about, Dr. Cadet. My dessert course, I want to celebrate a woman of color who is probably the greatest, people say science fiction writer. I often recommend books as my dessert course. Octavia Butler, Parable of the Sower is kind of her classic work about these times you were just referencing. What did you say? Chaos or uprising. Elaine's got it. Chaos or uprising. Octavia Butler in this novel, actually, it kind of takes place now, imagines a time of chaos and uprising, and how would that play out? And the heroine is a strong Black woman, but it's a fantastic book, and I just recommend all of her work. And with that, I think we're going to wrap things up. Thank you so much to our guests. And folks, you can read about our guest, Philana Bouvier, at demaineestates.com. You can check out her work. That's spelled DEMEINE, demaineestates.com.
And when you do that day, it'll be the main event.
Exactly.
And you...
Just full of dad jokes. I love dad jokes, so this is great. Yeah.
Just today, right? And you can read about Dr. Akilah Cadet and her work, her incredible work, at changecadet.com, and that's Cadet, CADET, changecadet.com. And you can find me at winewise.biz. My day job is importing about 95 different wine producers from Europe, a bunch of champagne, Lopez de Heredia, Filipa Pato, a few others. It's my day job. I like it. It's awesome. Some champagnes too. But let's not talk about that. Let's go to Catherine. Where can we find you?
And once again, your name is Martin Reyes, Master of Wine. Yes.
Yep.
And you can find me at catherinecole.com, but don't go there. Go to the foretop.org. Listen to the podcast. Check it out. We really, really appreciate it when you review us on your favorite podcast app, so please do that. And yeah, thanks so much for joining us, everyone. It's been such a delight to be here in the Napa Valley.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been the Four Top Podcast. Catherine Cole is our executive producer, Nick Toole is our producer, and I'm Keelan King, sound supervisor. We are also assisted by audio editor Michelle Richards, media and design manager Ruby Welkovich, and sales director Kristen Castagna. Please visit our website, theforetop.org, to learn more about us, listen to back episodes, and purchase books written by our amazing panelists. If you have not already subscribed to The Four Top on iTunes or Spotify, please do so, and please leave us a rating. Every rating feeds the algorithm and helps new listeners find The Four Top. Stay safe out there, and thanks for listening.